Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Yeah, absolutely. Always ready to explore.
Today we're heading to a pretty unique location. You might think you know it, but there's way more to it than meets the eye. The equator.
Oh, interesting.
Specifically, we're focusing on the equator in Ecuador. Ever pictured yourself standing with one foot in each hemisphere?
Can't say I have, but it's definitely a cool thought.
It's more than just a cool thought, though. We've been digging into some excerpts about both the equator itself and Ecuador. Fascinating stuff. Turns out the equator is more than just a line on a map.
Oh, absolutely. It actually shapes our world in ways you might not expect.
For real. Like, did you know that the Earth's circumference at the equator is a massive 40,075 kilometers?
Wow, that's a big number.
That's 24,901 miles. Try even picturing walking that distance.
Yeah, pretty much impossible to wrap your head around. To really understand the significance, we need to break down what the equator actually is. So it's this imaginary line that circles the Earth. It divides the planet into the northern and southern hemispheres. And it's located at precisely 0 degrees latitude.
Which brings us to Ecuador, right?
Right.
The name itself literally means Republic of the Equator.
They've really embraced their geography.
They really have. There's even a monument called Mitad del Mundo. That means middle of the world city. It's just north of Quito, and it supposedly marks where the equator passes through.
I say supposedly because, well, thanks to modern GPS, we've discovered that the actual equator is a tad off.
No way.
Yeah, by a couple hundred meters. Makes you wonder how they even figured out where it was back in the day, before all this fancy tech.
Seriously, like how did they even determine the equator's location without GPS?
Early explorers were pretty brilliant. They relied on celestial navigation. By observing the positions of stars and the sun, they could calculate their latitude.
Wow.
Super complex stuff, required a deep understanding of astronomy.
That's incredible. Talk about dedication. But okay, so back to that off by a bit thing. This whole situation has actually sparked a bit of a debate, right?
Totally. Because there's another place, Museo Solar Inti Nan, a museum that claims it's sitting on the true equator.
A real battle of the equators. And that kind of leads into some seriously cool physics stuff, too.
Oh, for sure. The equator is where you experience some unique phenomena, all thanks to Earth's rotation and its shape.
You mean like how water drains straight down at the equator with no swirling?
You got it. That's the Coriolis effect, or, well, the lack of it. The Coriolis effect normally causes fluids to curve as they move across Earth's surface. But at the equator, that force is so weak that you wouldn't see that familiar swirl when water goes down a drain.
No way. So is it actually true that you can balance an egg on a nail at the equator? Is that real or just a myth?
It's true. No magic involved, though. It's all about the Earth's centrifugal force, the force produced by its rotation. Well, it's strongest at the equator. And that, combined with the fact that the Earth bulges a tiny bit at the equator, makes gravity feel ever so slightly weaker. Just enough to make balancing an egg a bit easier.
Mind blown.
I know, right?
Yeah.
It's wild.
I love how the equator isn't just some abstract line. It has these tangible effects.
Absolutely.
You mentioned weaker muscle strength at the equator, too. Have you ever felt that yourself?
Well, it's not something you'd really notice in your daily life, but the slightly weaker gravity does technically have an impact on stuff like muscle strength and even the weight of objects. It's subtle, for sure, but it shows how geography and physics are all intertwined.
So if I'm getting this right, Ecuador is a pretty special place, not just because it's named after the equator, but because it gives us a chance to actually experience this amazing phenomenon for ourselves.
Couldn't have said it better myself. You can actually stand on the equator, and you can see physics in action in these really cool ways.
It's not just about the line, it's about what happens there.
Exactly. It also leaves us with a lot to think about, like, if gravity is a bit weaker at the equator, could that impact how athletes perform? Could you maybe jump higher or run faster there?
Now, that's a thought-provoking question. It makes you wonder if that plays a role in the success of Ecuadorian athletes, especially in certain sports.
Intriguing.
Something to ponder for sure. Until next time, dear listeners, keep exploring.
Happy exploring.